Welcome to Chopper's Politics, presented by Laurence Fox, formerly presented by Christopher Hope.
That's not true, listeners. It's Christopher Hope's podcast, but with me today is Laurence Fox. You've seen him create a splash on the BBC's Question Time.
So to call me a white privileged male is to be racist. You're being racist.
And cause a stir on social media. And now he's creating a new political party. I'm talking, of course, about my guest today, Laurence Fox. The actor, best known for his role in detective drama Lewis, says his new party will aim to represent people who are tired of being told that we represent the very thing we have in history stood against. It's been called the next UKIP for culture. Laurence Fox says he's already raised £5 million in donations to get it up and running. So let's find out why he's turning his hand to politics from acting and which audience he's trying to appeal to. Welcome to the podcast, Laurence. Welcome to the Red Lion Pub.
Thank you very much.
You've been spotted here recently drinking with Tory MPs. Why is this?
Well, I'll tell you something I've noticed about politics. There are some similarities between politics and acting and showbiz in terms of the quantities of beer consumed by the relative participants.
Now, you've launched your new party called Reclaim. That was in the Sunday Telegraph last weekend. It emerged and you talked about it for the first time. How has your last 5 days been as the leader of a new party?
Very busy. Yeah, it's been very interesting though, because as an actor, what happens is if someone picks you up in a Mercedes in the morning because they don't trust you to drive yourself to work, then you get out of the Mercedes and someone goes and gets you breakfast and you don't have to think. And then if you say anything, everyone just nods and goes,
Yes,
very
wisdom
wise.
Is emerging from the
Very
mouth
wise.
of the actor.
The actor is speaking, everyone be quiet. And then you realise that that's all an act on their behalf. Well, I mean, I realised it quite early on.
Yes.
So the last period while I've been working on Reclaim has been a rude awakening into the fact that, people push back with their thinking, which is great, actually. I've really enjoyed it.
So what is the point of Reclaim? I mean, as a feeling of, take back control we saw in the Brexit debate, is people taking back what they had before and they've lost? Is that the point?
Well, I suppose, we were heading in the right direction as far as in the truest sense of the word progressive, weren't we, as a society? And then suddenly things started to grind to a halt and, if anything, go backwards. And I suppose that began with the freedom of speech thing and the right to offend. And one has to reclaim the conversation, the ability to have the conversation. And the only way to have a decent conversation is in a reasoned way, multifaceted way, instead of this simple univariant analysis that the hard lefty wokey chums that I love so much are insisting that we talk.
At what point did you want to start a party? When did this moment come to you?
It's an evolutionary aspect, isn't it? So I did Question Time, and then...
That was in January.
That was in January, wasn't it?
Yes.
It was an interesting time.
Yes.
And then I obviously didn't realise that saying something which... I think it was my first example of saying something that I genuinely felt and didn't think was in any way controversial.
The Meghan Markle question you had there.
She has been torn to pieces.
It's not racism.
It absolutely is.
We're the most tolerant, lovely country in Europe. Let's
Says a
celebrate our women.
privileged
It's not
man.
racism.
Says
It's
a
so
white
easy to
privileged
throw the
man.
charge of racism at everybody, and it's really starting to
What
get
worries
boring
me about
now.
your comment is you are a white privileged male who has no experience in this.
I mean, can I
I
just...
can't help what I am. I was born like this. It's an immutable
So
characteristic.
therefore
So to
you
call me a
cannot,
white privileged male is to be
unfortunately-
racist. You're being racist.
The Meghan Markle question, who would be the best Labour leader? I mean, all of it essentially I was hopping around the minefield like
Yes.
you wouldn't believe. It was hilarious. So yeah, the acorn possibly got put in the ground after the Question Time explosion. Obviously, my children starting to talk about racism in totally inappropriate ways. Coming back from school saying, I'm sorry if this is racist, Dad, but Mum's a better cook than you. Stuff like that. So you're going, what are you teaching my children in school? And then, it's sort of evolution. But I'd been evolving. It had been evolving before. I remember getting very upset about the Believe the Victim stuff in terms of the Kavanaugh hearings in America. So it's a series of things. Then I think, okay, movement. Shall I form a movement? And we can go and bash on the door of the government and really mess with them and tell them, well, not mess with them, that's not fair, hold them to account. And then I thought, movement. And then I look around and I see these amazing movements that are just fabulous. And I go, is the government going to move as a result of a movement? Or is the government going to move at the threat of you taking a couple of their votes away from them? What's more likely? So then I think, got to be done.
The latter.
And also I get a lot of stories from people whose lives are being affected by these issues in very much the same way as my life was.
It's being shut down because of...
I think it's an attempt to pander to this very small, very, very angry minority of people who feel that they have absolutely every right to not be offended and therefore can control the language we use.
Is that a Twitter thing, do you think? Or is it, are big companies getting sucked into that space?
It's my former alma mater, RADA thing. I think they've just said we're going to rename the George Bernard Shaw Theatre because he's problematic. I'm like, sure, he's thrilled having given all the profits from Pygmalion to keep the place up and running. And then they've stopped Restoration Comedy because that is also problematic. And I don't know who's writing these emails because I get them from RADA, I get them from Equity, I get them from BAFTA, from the arts institutions that I was formerly part of. And they all say the same thing. We are a terrible bunch of racists. We're awfully sorry. We're going to do something about it. And you're just like going, this is not the RADA I remember, or the RADA that produced Adrian Lester and David Harewood and all of these, wonderful actors. So my view was that it's getting steadily worse. And the more you allow this stuff to dominate in culture, the more it becomes normalised.
Is it a sort of self-loathing, do you think, amongst people, that they feel, I'm privileged, white, had a good life, and, and then you look back into history and see how awful the history was for BAME groups, for example, and they want to say sorry?
I think there is an element of white saviourdom about the whole thing, potentially, which is, again, really useless. And also then I have linguistic problems with the word BAME, for example.
Yeah.
So, you lot. It's essentially, it's that sort of the way it's talking to you. It's like, well, if you're black, Asian, ethnic minority, then you all have the same view. It's the most patronising thing you can do to anybody.
And why do you think there's this kind of collective amongst institutions? I mean, do you think they should be renaming theatres, or should they be putting a plaque in the George Bernard Shaw Theatre to explain what he wrote and why some people don't like it? Is that the answer?
I would go down that path. Yes, was it Hilary Mantel who said it's not our job to tick off history? We kind of eradicate these things, and also we shouldn't be judging history from our current perspective. And we do have a sort of self-loathing desire to just take the bad bits out of history and not look at the positives, especially in regards to stuff like slavery. And we hear a lot about slavery. And
which the UK ended, or helped to end.
Which we did, at the loss of many sailors' lives and, Wilberforce and stuff like this. So I suppose you're not trying to engender a great sense of national pride, but you're trying to reclaim a reasoned conversation so that our children don't leave school white, privileged, self-loathing children, because we've seen how that works out when they leave university.
Yes, well, they become actors, don't they? No.
I'm so glad I didn't go to university. So glad. I mean, there are some good universities, there must be, but... Oof.
And there's no one in politics making these points at the moment, as far as you can see.
Well, no, suddenly there is. I noticed over the weekend.
Suddenly,
Suddenly,
and that could be, you're drawing them towards your lodestar, possibly.
Well, I'm here to help.
And that's why some people have been calling it, now you're going to contest this, culture wars UKIP. Now, what they mean by that is that you'll have an effect on parties to make them think about the issues you're raising. It doesn't mean that you are like UKIP or you are Nigel Farage, but do you sort of mean?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
do you take that comparison or not?
Yeah, I've been called a lot worse, apparently, recently, so I don't mind. I think UKIP, again, in the way that we deal with culture, the minute you say the word UKIP, everyone goes, UKIP, terrible. And in softer ways, they go, Cecil Rhodes, awful. It's a reflex that you're fed through the media. So UKIP were very successful in campaigning for the referendum, weren't they? So, as much as I don't think it's probably the best comparison, I think it's fair enough.
Have you ever voted before in your life?
I voted Remain.
Did you vote Remain?
Yeah.
I guess that went well then. And did you vote any political party?
I've voted Labour and Conservative in my life.
Have you? Yeah.
I'll never, ever vote Labour again with Keir Starmer in power.
Because of
taking the knee, and because of then actually verbally taking the knee.
The taking the knee means when he was photographed in his office kneeling.
He's going to regret that one, I have a feeling.
For Black Lives Matter, wasn't he? Why does that annoy you, particularly him kneeling?
Well, it's what he's kneeling to that annoys me.
So he's kneeling in memory of George Floyd, who was murdered in America.
Yes, who died in America.
Why is that a problem, him kneeling for that? Or do you think he's not sure what he's kneeling for?
I'm not sure he knew exactly what he was kneeling for. I think in a lot Black Lives Matter is a very tricky thing, isn't it? Because it's patently obvious that Black Lives Matter, they really, really do. And we all, well, except for the very small minority of horrible, bigoted, nasty racists in this country and across the world, he was kneeling, I suppose, in solidarity with the belief that Black Lives Matter. But actually, yes, Black Lives Matter is a movement. And quite a pernicious one at that, as far as I can tell. You know, I mean, just the whole idea of asking someone to take the knee to you, it creates in my head a very odd... I don't see taking the knee as a gesture of solidarity. I see taking the knee as a gesture of subservience. And so for me, I think it was tricky that way. And then once I started reading into Black Lives Matter and then seeing how Black Lives Matter is now being taken over, possibly for the best intentions of it, by sort of anarchic Marxist, one might argue, racial supremacist movement.
Are you sympathetic with that plane which buzzed around? I think
Burnley.
Yeah, all lives matter.
Oh, I 100% think all lives matter. Yeah, and I've had some very interesting conversations with some very smart people who say all lives matter is racist. I think people think that it's a provocative response to Black Lives Matter. But actually, if you engage the Black Lives Matter crowd on their mantra of the fact that we're all systemically racist and stuff like that, then you've lost the war already, because you're apologising for something that you are not in the debate as it begins. So I think all lives matters is where the conversation should begin. When
you saw Keir Starmer saying he'd had unconscious bias training this week, what did you think?
I thought, you're never, ever going to get into power, ever. That's what I thought. The problem with unconscious bias training, to start with...
Have you done it yet?
No, and I never will, and I would encourage everyone to never do it, because it's part of critical race theory, which is a dangerous and vicious ideology. The problem with unconscious bias training is that it never produces the same result twice. So therefore, it's a fairly pointless piece of pseudoscience, and it's ghost hunting, as they say. You know, you're trying to find racism in someone. But Keir Starmer stood up and he's using all of this language in the way that he speaks about structural inequality being a racist thing as well. And that, once you're into the language of critical race theory, which he is, and you're steeped in it, you're telling an 80% majority white country, not that that makes any difference, that they're all a bunch of racists. And I have a feeling, there'll obviously be people that take him at his best word, but I have a feeling those people will turn around and go, I don't want you, who's there to represent me, telling me that I'm disgusting.
And that was a mistake that Jeremy Corbyn made with Labour, wasn't it? By almost, never he said it, but the idea from the party was that people who voted for Brexit in northern towns were somehow racist, and which has always been a contention we would never accept on this podcast, for example.
No, it's not. It's absolutely not right. They just have a difference of opinion.
What made you choose the name Reclaim for your party? It sounds like a salvage yard, but it means more.
I know, I quite like the salvage yard aspect of it. I love the thought. I often reclaim things. So when I lived in the countryside, you'd often find me knocking around a reclaim yard. Why not? It's still fit for purpose.
It's
right?
It's of old relics of what we used to have in this country and we've lost, do you think?
Or it's just something that's always been there and is very useful. And you don't need to go to IKEA to feel, revive your idea. I mean, it's not why I chose it, but every time I think of Reclaim, often I do think of a reclamation yard, and I rather like it.
We're interrupting this podcast to bring you news of another Telegraph show we think you might like. It's called Planet Normal, and it's hosted by me, Liam Halligan.
And me, Alison Pearson. We're both Telegraph columnists who share the view that far too often those who shout the loudest on the telly just don't represent the views of normal people.
So take a trip with us to Planet Normal. We're joined by some stellar guests, well-known voices from politics, business and the arts.
All from different fields, but they have one thing in common. They're at the top of their game, but distinctly down to earth. The good news is I finally learnt what a podcast is and even how you subscribe to it. It's actually quite simple. Search for Planet Normal on your podcast app or click on the link in the show notes for this episode.
You don't really know what a podcast is, do you?
I am one. Look, I am one. Who needs to know what it is? I am one, okay? Shut up.
And of course, you made your big splash on the political scene with Question Time, and then, you are an actor. You presume you went back to your day job.
Did I?
I don't know if you did, or perhaps you're resting. But I wonder how you were received by other cast members of whatever you were doing.
Well, again, this problem of freedom of speech and the right to offend. As far as other actors are concerned, I had a very threatening phone call from one who I'd worked with for 6 months, which what was quite odd was the fact that when he phoned me, I heard him put it on loudspeaker and go shh, so that I knew there was a table of people there. And then he said, because I tweeted every single human life is sacred, which is a belief of mine. I think, should we start there? Logical, humane, universal, real, positive, progressive, none of the shite that you throw at me. And yes, so he told me, how could I do this? How could I say this stuff when he really loved me?
Right.
So I explained to him about David Dorn. So I said, why is George Floyd being made a martyr? And then David Dorn, the retired police chief who went over to stop a friend of his shops being looted, was shot in the chest, and it was played out on Facebook. So did his Black Lives Matter? That's what I said to this actor. And, often when you do engage people in reasoned debate about this stuff, happens. So off. He was off. Then I get some very funny texts from actors going, totally behind you, mate. 100% behind you. And then 2 seconds later, I'll see their Twitter feed and they'll go, although it was a very male-dominated show, here is some pictures of the great BAME and women and stuff and you're just like, okay.
Yes.
Adopt a position. Just be authentic. It must be so hard pretending to be woke as well. I think that must be very...
Did you find yourself unemployable after the remarks on Question Time? Did it affect work?
I'm employed now, aren't I?
Yes, you're employed now.
As an actor, I really hope that I won't be unemployed as an actor one day, because I do feel that this is it's a very dangerous cultural blip, I hope. But it's also the blossoming of something that's been going on for decades and decades and decades. So yes, there are going to be people that say, and it only takes one in a crew of 150 to say, I don't feel safe on set with that racist, for me to be like...
Was work cancelled after Question Time?
Well, we had COVID, but I've certainly been made aware. I was warned several times that unless I changed the tune I was playing, that it would have a very drastic effect on my career. And then I was warned formally that it was certain to have a devastating effect on my career. And the problem with doing that to someone like me is because I have a platform and because I believe very strongly in what I believe in, all you're doing is empowering me. So threatening me doesn't work.
It's like you're almost blacklisted. I mean,
totally, yeah.
Back to 50s Hollywood with the communists and the rest.
I love show business. I would love to be able one day to walk back onto set, not grinning, but strong and stoical, and know that at least some of the people on there who've been quiet and saddened and stumped down might come up, as they do every single day as I walk around London, and go, thank you, mate.
That you can now...
Have an opinion.
Isn't
it crazy? It's so wrong that we should have an opinion and then be able to share it with someone else.
Isn't the answer to the concern you have about opinion, just turn off Twitter? Leave Twitter. Because in the real world, people don't really have the same cancel culture.
I don't agree. Literally every day I walk around and I'm stopped by people all day. And yesterday I was stopped, and it made me very emotional, by an artist who paints family portraits. And he started crying. And saying, I can't, I'm literally terrified.
Because it comes from the right place, the woke world, doesn't it? It's people wanting to be nicer to other people. It's like they're trying to create a kinder world, aren't they? By righting the wrongs of 300 years ago. They're trying to make this country kinder. That's where it's coming from. Do you know what I mean?
Is it? Or is it coming from a desire to tear it all down and start again? Or tear it all down just for the sake of tearing it all down, which is often what revolutionaries do, aren't they? The Jacobins and stuff like that. It gets carried away with chopping people's heads off after a while. I don't trust them. I don't trust their motivation. I think you can have a Kevin Whately, who is an old school lefty, and I spent 10 years nattering to him. And I spoke to him the other day, and we disagree on a lot of things. My best friend is a socialist. We have this. I think wokedom.
That's how it should be.
Yeah. And one can have these reasonable conversations, but wokedom is something very different. I think it's much more pernicious. It wants to. I mean, it's fine. You can't cancel me because I'm uncancelable.
Well, let's ask some from nuts and bolts about the party. How many members or people have got in touch since the news emerged in last week's Sunday Telegraph?
So last week's Sunday Telegraph, because we were in a rush, we had to get the domain name while we were waiting for the domain name Reclaim. It was called the Laurence Fox Party, which was hell for me.
Well, it's great. It's fun to describe. That's a name, isn't it? Yes.
The Laurence Fox for Prime Minister Party. Laurence Fox for this. So about 10,000 so far. 5 days. Yeah. There'll be plenty more as well.
That's quite a lot, but that's okay, isn't it? You know, for listeners who don't know, the Lib Dems have around 120,000 members. I think the Tories around the same number. So you're 1/10 of the way there.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of people that just haven't been represented and aren't being thought about in politics.
Are you asking them who they voted for in the last election, or don't you care?
Well, at the moment, busy as I am, I haven't gone through all 10,000 emails.
And you've raised money, haven't you?
I have.
Apparently £5 million has been pledged or handed to you in a big fat envelope.
It was delivered in a Jeep in 2 very large suitcases directly from Moscow.
Money pledged, then?
Money pledged. Have you ever tried to start up a bank account for a political party?
I have not.
It's very interesting.
It's hard, isn't it?
It's not easy. So, but fortunately, because we're not a political party, I can operate as a movement at the moment.
Yes.
So I'm still operating.
What, from your current account? Is the money going to your current account?
The money go to my friend Vladimir. No, it's, we've got an
It's properly done.
Oh, absolutely. But do you think you can do this sort of thing without doing it properly?
No. Can you name any of your supporters?
Jeremy Hosking is one of them.
So you can confirm him. He was a former Tory donor, big Brexit supporter in the old days when Brexit was a live currency, and now it's not. How much has he pledged?
5.
5 million?
Yeah.
From him?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah.
So 5 million from him?
He cares.
How did you two come together? Did you ask to meet him or he met you?
He met me, and I sat down at a table with him. He said, "What do you want to do about it?"
It being?
The cultural problem that we are currently
With a glint in his eye.
Well, I wouldn't say he had a glint in his eye. He's quite shy, actually. And I looked at him and I said, well, you have to give people an opportunity to put their vote somewhere.
Because he's been toying with parties, the Brexit Express and things like this for a while. And now he's delighted on this new idea, hasn't he? I mean...
He has. Well, I think whether you agree or disagree with Jeremy Hosking or anybody else in this world, he believes very strongly in, the greatness of our country and our union. So I think he's very philanthropic when it comes to working out what he wants to do to help change it.
And if he's backing it with £5 million, are you getting support from other big business people? Or?
There's lots of people who want.
And how much more have you got pledged?
You'd be amazed. But apolitical people who you would never think were particularly political, who will approach you and say, "What can I do?"
See, more than 5 million now. That's a lot of money for
I know.
Folks.
So if my Instagram account suddenly changes to me on a very nice speedboat in the Caribbean,
yes,
you'll know what went wrong.
Yes. So are you targeting raising a certain amount by the end of the year or something? Or?
No. I've budgeted this up to the next election.
And that's enough to keep you going for the election, I'd have thought.
I mean, yeah. Unless I hire 30,000 people all of a sudden. No, I've very carefully budgeted. The thing is, I've been told I can do whatever I want to do, but I must account very carefully for what I do.
Yes.
So yeah, we're budgeted fully till the next election. Sorry, guys.
Have you got staff?
I have a very small staff currently.
How many people?
3.
3? And are you in touch with candidates? I mean, let's be honest about it. The election will happen probably in 3.5 years' time or so.
Yeah, but there's also elections next year, aren't there?
In May? Mm-hmm. Are you standing at those elections or someone? You're looking at it.
Looking at it all.
Where will the party be, let's say, in 3 years' time? Will you have...
Well, I'll be Prime Minister.
Of course, yeah. I'm taking for as read listeners, yes.
Yes. Who knows where the party will be in 3 years' time? It's impossible to tell. But I have a feeling genuine feeling just from walking around, even in London. I mean, get out of London and it's beyond the people. My dad went to the old pub because he stopped acting for 10 years to become a missionary, and he went to the old pub up the road in Sheffield when he went to see his friend, and they all came up to him and gave him a huge hug and a clap, and he said, "Thank God for your son." And then that was the weekend I was climbing.
Which
in
seats are you
Street.
targeting then? Because you can't fight every seat, can you? Let's say you fight 20 seats at the election next time.
Why?
I don't know. You tell me.
I'm not going to tell you.
You're not going to tell me?
No.
Which seats would you target? Would it be, Conservative seats, or would it be Labour seats?
It's it's across the board. It's not a Conservative.
Are you drawing up a hit list of seats where you think you might have a chance?
We're drawing up a lot of lists at the moment.
You were nodding then, Laurence Fox. I saw that.
All right.
I'm asking you details. You're 5 days into launching a party. I appreciate you don't know the answers.
Yeah, exactly.
But when you look in the mirror in the morning, you're shaving, or you haven't shaved today, but if you were shaving, what makes you think there looks back at me, an MP? I'm always asking this of MPs. What raises them above the mass of other people and think I can be Prime Minister, or I can be an MP? What makes you think that about you?
In this situation, it's a sense of duty. I feel like I feel duty bound to do it. I feel duty bound to do it for my children. I feel duty bound to do it for those whose voices are just not being listened to at all by a Conservative government with an 80-seat majority. And you had Boris, the Telegraph columnist, and now you've got Boris, the politician. And it's like, can someone do something, please? We're all getting very upset.
Because if he were a columnist now, he would be demanding to know why the Tory government is locking up students in Manchester.
So I'm demanding to know. I will be demanding to know myself from him.
Yeah. When can we see a list of policies? You've got a blue folder with you, which you won't let me look into.
My blue folder? No one
What's in the blue folder, Laurence?
Nobody looks in the blue folder but me. Yes, we're working on. Obviously, you'll get policies at launch.
And when are you launching?
We're aiming to launch in November.
In November?
It depends on. Apparently, the Electoral Commission can also be quite tricky, I've heard.
Yes, well, they can be with the name, can't they? They might think the name isn't. Are you worried about the name is safe? You think to get through?
Well, I hope so. I think it's pretty obvious what it's trying to do: reclaim, reason, reform, progress. 4 verbs, active verbs.
In terms of you and your family, how are they reacting to this? You're the son of James Fox, famous actor. Your family members in acting. How are they all reacting to what you've done?
With minorly sweaty brows, I suppose, a few of them. But my dad, who is an absolute hero of mine, and my mum, we lost her this year, but is an absolute hero of mine as well. My dad and I walk every day round the park, and we discuss for an hour, and we discuss the ins and outs of where we're going. So dad is a fan.
He's going to vote for his son.
I hope so.
You lost your mum. I'm sorry to hear that this year, and that explains the tattoos on your hands, which say freedom, space.
They were her favourite words, and I think it revolves around the freedom to speak and the space to think. And so, whilst it has nothing to do with what I'm doing, well, I suppose it does in the fact that she's living with me still in my mind. That's what I demand that people have, because that is how we're going to actually progress.
And you have children, Laurence Fox, and we don't want to go into details, but the impact on them in public life is often quite tough for children of MPs, I know personally, and I wonder what you think of that.
I have. And I've discussed it with them, and they refer to it as, oh no, not the boring politics stuff again. But the greatest thing about kids is, I teach them that I don't mind whatever they think, as long as they can explain to me why they think it. It's called critical thinking, isn't it? And they need to teach children that. It's important.
And Laurence Fox, you're well known on Twitter, but how do you deal with your legacy tweets? Because, of course, people's opinions change, don't they?
I think Twitter, for all of its goodness and the ability to share messages, and I've made some great friends, made contact with people like James Lindsay and stuff on Twitter. The problem with Twitter for me is that it exists in perpetuity, so your position isn't allowed to move. So my view is that Twitter should probably introduce a retract button where the tweet remains up, and it can go, this was retracted by the author, so that their position is shown to have grown and developed. But also, if you just Google tweet delete, it'll say to you, log in, and then it'll ask you when you want your tweets to be deleted after how long. So I tend to have it at about 3 months, because I think usually my position changes, or not changes, modifies after, 3 months.
3 months.
At least, but you can tweet delete for a day.
If you change your mind every 3 months, why do you want to be a politician?
it's not about changing your mind every 3 months. It's about the fact that you don't want someone to spend their life trawling back through every tweet you've ever done in your life and with defense archaeology. I don't think it's the correct way of, it's a sort of bad faith way of approaching people's arguments. Because also the other thing I want to reclaim is the right for people to make mistakes. All right. It's really important that we're able to make mistakes and we're able to go out there and say, I made a mistake. I'm not necessarily sorry, but it was a mistake. And people are also allowed to evolve their positions. People are allowed to be free to just express themselves. So stuck there in a world where you're permanently worried about being caught up in some, misunderstanding, as per Andrea Leadsom, that sort of thing. It's okay to make mistakes, to move on, to be courageous, to be fearless. All of these things are very important. And unfortunately, one of the side effects of that is you are a massive proponent of free speech. There are going to be people that are going to say horrible things as part of that thing, but those people will be put down and rebutted beautifully by the vast majority of people here who just want to get on with their lives and not have to censor thoughts coming out of their mouths before they've even had them.
Got to ask you the question they'll be asking me, or that my Twitter feed was saying, are you racist, Laurence Fox?
No. But I can't prove it. It's like being in a madhouse.
Kafka.
It's like being in a madhouse and going, I'm not insane. But this is the language. This is the problem of where they want to play you. They want to play you on a field that we're all systemically racist, which is absolutely categorically not true, and is so anti-progress, deeply regressive, and divides society. So I have a feeling this thing will come and bite them in the bum.
In one tweet, Laurence Fox, how would you describe your new political party?
Oh, good question. In one tweet, how would I describe my political party? Giving you a home.
Laurence Fox, many thanks for joining us on this week's Chopper's Politics. Thank you.
Thanks, Chopper. It's my politics, by the way. You've been fired.
It's my show, people.
No, you've been fired. He's not Chopper. He's a very naughty boy.
Very naughty boy. Well, that was extraordinary. I think you may be hearing the beginning of the next battleground for the next general election. Laurence Fox may dispute the idea that it's a UKIP for culture, but there's no question that this new party, Reclaim, while it might sound like an Essex salvage yard, could actually draw voters away from the main parties and could cause a problem when we get to polling day. Let's wait and see. But that's my thoughts. Let us know what you think about what Laurence Fox was saying by getting in touch by emailing us, chopperspolitics@telegraph.co.uk, or tweet us, we're at Choppers Podcast. You may also have noticed that this week you got a bonus episode popping up on Tuesday. I've been hosting a 3-part series called The Trump Card with Nigel Farage, the UK politician who Donald Trump knows best. It's full of anecdotes, gossip, and a real revealing insight on how you can understand what the president is trying to do and whether he might even win the election in November. Telegraph subscribers can listen to episode 2 right now by going to telegraph.co.uk/Trump Card. Everyone else must wait till next week. Once again, thanks to my guest this weekend, Laurence Fox. Thanks to my producers, Louisa Wells and Theo Luludis. But most importantly of all, as ever, thank you to you for listening. Without you listening, we wouldn't be here. And finally, always buy your copy of the Daily Telegraph. Saturday's edition will feature this interview. Until next time, cheerio!
Chris.
Sorry.
Stop tapping your pen.
I'm sorry, don't join the conversation. Don't join the conversation.